PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and we are here on Vegas Hockey Hub. And on this latest edition, we're going to be doing something a little bit different on this channel, kind of a new concept here, as instead of the segments that we have done on this show, we do our, Vegas Hockey Hub recap shows, which for the 24-25 season, that will be year 2 of us doing our Vegas Hockey Hub recap shows. We've done our player profiles, breaking down a player's career from when they started to now as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. We also do our prospect watch. We do all these different segments and stuff like that here on Vegas Hockey Hub. But what we're going to do on this edition is a progression of a player's career. Essentially, I want to talk about how a player has progressed as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. And for the first example and for the first part of this series, talking about the progression of a certain player here on the Vegas Golden Knights organization, we're going to be talking about a forward, number 55, and that is Keegan Kolesar. So we're really going to be breaking this up as a progression, and it will be in parts. We'll talk about how he got acquired by the Vegas Golden Knights. We're going to talk about, his minor league career with the Vegas Golden Knights and what he did leading up as a member of the Golden Knights organization. Then we'll talk about, the beginning of his career in the Vegas Golden Knights at the NHL level, talk about any notable stuff that happened in his career as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. And then finally, we will get to the present day and talk about what he is doing right here, right now with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. So, yeah, very fun episode, but we're going to be talking about the progression of Keegan Kolesar here with the Vegas Golden Knights on Vegas Hockey Hub. So, starting out when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, is him being acquired from the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. Now, there are some people who do not know that Keegan Kolesar was not drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights. As a matter of fact, Keegan Kolesar was not even part of the expansion draft during the 2017 NHL expansion draft, as the Columbus Blue Jackets pick actually was William Karlsson. So, when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, the part 1 of this progression of Keegan Kolesar is kind of going to be talking about how he got to the Vegas Golden Knights. Because the one part that some people may not realize is that he was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2015 NHL draft. And not only was he drafted in the 3rd round of the 2015 NHL draft, but he never suited up for the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. He never put on a uniform in the AHL or ECHL as a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Why was that? Because he was with the Seattle Thunderbirds of the Western Hockey League. He spent his junior career playing in Seattle before he got drafted by Columbus and the 2 seasons after he was drafted by the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was still out there playing in the Western Hockey League. And even though he put up some solid numbers and was actually showing some really good progress in the Seattle Thunderbirds organization, there was never a point where he was sent to the AHL playing for, Cleveland or Lake Erie or whatever the heck the name was at that point. No, he was still playing in Seattle, still playing in juniors by the time 2017 came around. Now, I do want to pivot, and before I talk about his trade, I want to go to what happened 48 hours before they traded for Keegan Kolesar. As 48 hours before they did the thing I mentioned before, the 2017 NHL expansion draft. And the Tampa Bay Lightning gave up a 2nd-round pick plus a guy like Nikita Gusev and some conditional stuff like assets to have the Vegas Golden Knights draft Jason Garrison in the 2017 NHL expansion draft. Now, you might be asking yourself, if I'm talking about him getting acquired from Columbus, why am I talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning? Well, here's the reason why. The Tampa Bay Lightning's second-round pick that they had in 2017 went to the Vegas Golden Knights. And what Vegas did was they took that second-round pick and they traded it to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And who did they acquire with giving up that second-round pick? Keegan Kolesar. So, I am not Steve Dangle. I am not a trade tree. I'm not trying to do copyright infringement. Trust me, I like his series. I'm not that talented or at that level. But in a roundabout way, if the Vegas Golden Knights do not draft Jason Garrison, then they do not get a second-round pick. And if you don't have that second-round pick, you do not trade it to the Columbus Blue Jackets and get Keegan Kolesar. So, in a roundabout way, Vegas Golden Knights fans have to thank Jason Garrison for Keegan Kolesar. So, that's just kind of a little bit of a fun fact there, that thanks to Jason Garrison, Keegan Kolesar is a bottom six forward today with the Vegas Golden Knights. And when he got acquired, I do want to mention this, that when it came to the draft pick the Vegas Golden Knights gave up, it didn't turn out to be much. It was a average, middle six guy out there when it came to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And they also, in that second round, they did not end up trading that away. So when it came to the Columbus Blue Jackets, them using that draft pick eventually turned out to be a middle six guy for them. He played a few seasons in Columbus, and then he moved on. Whereas Keegan Kolesar is still performing to this day with the Vegas Golden Knights. So, with this being the part one side of it, how they acquired him from the Columbus Blue Jackets was on June 24th, 2017. That was around the NHL draft, because you had the expansion draft and then you had the draft in Chicago a few days later. So that is the part one of this video right here, explaining how Keegan Kolesar got to the Vegas Golden Knights to begin with, because some people don't remember that he was not drafted by the Golden Knights. As a matter of fact, when he was drafted, the Golden Knights weren't even existed yet. All right, 2015, the Vegas Golden Knights were not even on the map yet when it came to the NHL officially. So the Vegas Golden Knights, talking about the progression of Keegan Kolesar and just mentioning part one and how he got acquired from the Columbus Blue Jackets and became a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, moving over to part two, this is actually when he got into the minor league side of his career with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. Now, quick disclaimer, because it does say playing for Chicago Wolves in the AHL. Well, thanks to Hockey Reference and for Hockey DB for all the information and stats I use for research for this video. Yes, Keegan Kolesar did play a 20-game stint in the ECHL for the Quad City Mallards. And even though I could say ECHL plus AHL, because it was a short stint in the 2017-2018 season, and the fact that Keegan Kolesar spent 3 seasons playing in the AHL for the Chicago Wolves, I just decided to just do a quick disclaimer and explain the ECHL side of it. Did average around half a point per game in the ECHL. Did a really stellar job there, but he did not play enough time in the ECHL to really include it in terms of a lot of long stint. And for the Vegas Golden Knight fans and for the people who have watched our Prospect Watch videos here on this channel, you may be asking yourself a very important question. Why isn't the Henderson Silver Knights on here? And is it the Chicago Wolves? Why is it the Chicago Wolves for the AHL and not the Henderson Silver Knights? Well, simple explanation here. The Vegas Golden Knights, when they opened in 2017-2018, the Henderson Silver Knights simply did not exist yet. They were still the San Antonio Rampage, and they were not bought by Bill Foley. So, because the Henderson Overnights did not exist yet, that wasn't until 2020, 2021, the Vegas Golden Knights organization had to have an AHL affiliate. And interesting enough, they actually split the first season of the 2017-2018 season with a different NHL team. That NHL team turned out to be the St. Louis Blues. Hence, why if you ever go back and look at the 2017-2018 Chicago Wolves roster, you will see a combination of St. Louis Blues and Vegas Golden Knights. It's why Ivan Barbashev, I did a player profile on him a while back. Ivan Barbashev played for the Chicago Wolves with the Vegas Golden Knights. That's why you'll see a Vince Dunn, a Jordan Binnington, and Ivan Barbashev playing alongside an Alex Tuck, a Shea Theodore, a Zach Whitecloud, a Nicholas Haig. It was a split roster between St. Louis and Vegas. But getting back to Keegan Kolesar, Chicago Wolves, in his first season playing in Chicago, he did respectfully with them. He did very reasonable in his first full-time season playing for Chicago Wolves, put up some really good numbers there in his first season. And then he had his first taste of postseason experience as a professional hockey player. They went to the Calder Cup, as it is called, in 2018. They would lose in the first round of the Calder Cup playoffs. The Chicago Wolves did, but he did have 1 point in 3 games in the 2018 playoffs. So for Keegan Kolesar, his first season, you're really trying to get his feet wet, trying to establish himself as a AHLer with the Vegas Golden Knights. Fast forward to 2018-2019, and Keegan Kolesar would have a bit of a breakout season. As Keegan Kolesar in 2018-2019, not only did he play over 70 games for the Chicago Wolves organization, he eclipsed 20 goals on the year for the Chicago Wolves organization. And this is the only time in Keegan Kolesar's career that he would eclipse 20 goals as a professional hockey player. He has not done it as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. He did not do it in his final season in Chicago. But in that one season in 2018-2019, he did put up over 20 goals in that season. He also did put up a little over 35 points on the season, which is still to date the best season performance-wise in his entire career. And Keegan Kolesar did drop the gloves for the Vegas Golden Knights AHL affiliate in Chicago, as he accumulated a little under 100 penalty minutes in that 2018-2019 season. Now, one part that I do want to mention is that they went back to the Calder Cup playoffs in 2019 and would have a much bigger role with the Chicago Wolves, as this is a Chicago Wolves team that would make it all the way to the Calder Cup finals and take on the Charlotte Checkers. And Keegan Kolesar, during that 2019 playoffs, this is from HockeyDB as my reference, in 21 playoff games, he accumulated 6 goals, 11 points, and a little under 50 penalty minutes for the Chicago Wolves. And I also do want to mention, when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, despite the Chicago Wolves losing in the Calder Cup finals, losing to Charlotte in that series, it was a really good roster for the Vegas Golden Knights. And this was just the Vegas Golden Knights. This wasn't a split season kind of situation that you were seeing with the St. Louis Blues. There wasn't really that affiliation program there. In 2018-2019, Chicago Wolves, Vegas Golden Knights, Charlotte Checkers, Carolina Hurricanes, and that was the second season for Kolesar, but the best season of his career out there in the AHL. And then the third and final year he played in Chicago, that would be in 2019-2020. And he played in over 30 games for Chicago that year. And he did have 18 points. So he averaged just a little under half a point per game in Chicago in his final season in the minors. Not bad by Keegan Kolesar. And I also do want to mention there was no playoffs because of COVID in the pandemic. So his final run in Chicago would be that 18-point season, averaging a little over a half a point per game. So overall, this part 2, playing for Quad City in the ECHL for 20 games, playing over 3 seasons in the AHL for Chicago, Keegan Kolesar really cemented himself and planted himself as a future star in the Vegas Golden Knights organization. Him, Zach Whitecloud, Nicholas Hague, like those were the main 3 that kind of came up from Chicago and earned their spot on the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And he would make his impact with the Vegas Golden Knights, but that would be in part 3 of this series, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So when it comes to part 3, and this is kind of where the start of Keegan Kolesar is as a member of the NHL, more importantly, as a member of your Vegas Golden Knights. As during the 2019-2020 season, Keegan Kolesar, he would make his debut for the Vegas Golden Knights. Fantastic for him, as he would in January of 2020, he would make his NHL debut for the Vegas Golden Knights. And an interesting twist, it would be against the team that they acquired him from, as he would make his debut against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And kind of feels like a full circle type of moment. Drafted by Columbus, gets traded from Columbus to the Vegas Golden Knights, and then makes his debut for Vegas against Columbus. So kind of a full circle situation there. And even though he only made that one start in the 2019-2020 season, he did make his debut, did play some minutes out there in his debut. He would end up, kind of going back and forth between Chicago and Vegas, but as a healthy scratch. As in 2020, during the COVID situation, they would have what they called a bubble. They had taxi squads, and Keegan Kolesar was actually part of that for a little bit, as he would kind of, be like in a rotation of just, being up, being down, being on a different roster, different squad, stuff like that. Because during the NHL bubble, when it was in Edmonton, when it was, out there in just Canada, and that was it, there was what they called, a taxi squad. There was a reserve role for some players when it came to the playoff teams. So while the Vegas Golden Knights were out there trying to win a championship, they were competing out there in the bubble in Edmonton. Keegan Kolesar was kind of on that bubble, just, kind of waiting, seeing what was going to happen with the Vegas Golden Knights. Did not play in the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs, but he was part of that situation and what was going on there. Now, in the shortened 56-game 2020-2021 season, the Vegas Golden Knights, they would have a 56-game season, and Keegan Kolesar would actually earn his stripes with the Vegas Golden Knights. He would play in 44 of 56 games, and more importantly, when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, this was a situation where he would end up no longer being on that minor league role. This is kind of where Keegan Kolesar kind of started to earn his everyday situation with the Vegas Golden Knights. But overall, those 44 games with the Vegas Golden Knights in his first full-time season playing in the NHL. And Keegan Kolesar actually did reasonably well in his first season playing with the Vegas Golden Knights out there in 2020, 2021. As Keegan Kolesar would have his first 3 goals of his career. He would rack up 10 assists, but more importantly, in those 44 games, Keegan Kolesar would get 30 penalty minutes during that time period. But the most important aspect that came from the 2021 season was the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, as Keegan Kolesar would actually, earn a everyday spot in the 2021 playoffs, as during the 17 games that the Vegas Golden Knights played, he would suit up. He would have his first Stanley Cup playoff goal during the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs and would rack up 4 points in his first action in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2021. So really, that's just what part 3 of this was. Him earning his debut, then going on, playing 44 games, racking up 17 games in the postseason, and really kind of earning his stripes with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And moving on to part 4, this is really where the last couple of years has been with Keegan Kolesar, as we're talking about his progression with the Vegas Golden. So as we are talking about the progression of Keegan Kolesar with the Vegas Golden Knights organization, now getting into part 4, and this is kind of after the COVID situation, past the 2020-2021 season, and it's really just based off of what he has done the past 3 seasons. I'm talking about 21-22, 22-23, and then 23-24, the past season that we just saw. And when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, I really look at it and see what his stats did in those 3 seasons. And this is brought to you by Hockey Reference. This is where I got the stats from when it comes to Keegan Kolesar. Now, in 21-22, he did play in 77 of 82 games. That's why this part 4, becoming an everyday starter, applies. Because in that previous year where it was just 56 games, he did miss 12 of those games. He wasn't in the lineup every single day. He was in a good portion of it, but it wasn't an everyday situation. Whereas 21-22, he did become an everyday fourth-line winger for the Vegas Golden Knights. And he did start to capitalize on that situation. As in those 77 games, he did have 7 goals. That is a good pace for really his first, everyday starter type of situation. 7 goals in 77 games, especially for a bottom 6 forward. That's a really good job by him. There's also the same guy in Keegan Kolesar that in that 21-22 season, when he has 77 games played and 7 goals, he also accumulated 24 points on the season. So he was really earning his way with the Vegas Golden Knights, really giving his numbers and getting those up in his first everyday starter season. And he also racked up around 70 penalty minutes. So that's just a little under a penalty minute per game with the Vegas Golden Knights. So that 21-22 season, yeah, they missed the playoffs, unfortunately, for the Vegas Golden Knights. One of the only times ever the Golden Knights have missed the playoffs. But when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, he was, really helping himself out in that 21-22 season. So once again, those numbers, 77 games played, 7 goals, 17 assists, which accumulates to 24 points, and he had 68 penalty minutes during that 21-22 season. And we really started to see that Keegan Kolesar was really building up chemistry on that fourth line. We saw that we had some guys like Nicholas Waugh, for example, who was also building himself up on that fourth line with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, 22-23, the championship season for Keegan Kolesar. Now, this is going to be a 2-part here. The first one is just going to be his regular season, and then part 2 would be the postseason side of it. In the regular season, in 22-23, Keegan Kolesar played in 74 of 82 games, so a little bit less games than the year before, but a majority of the season he played. He had 8 goals on the season. That is a career high in the NHL for Keegan Kolesar, but unfortunately, he also only had 10 assists on the year, so his points did go down. It went down from 24 to 18. So despite having more goals, 1 more than the year prior, his stats went down by 6. Once again, brought to you by Hockey Reference. And with Keegan Kolesar in those 74 games, he ended up having the same amount of penalty minutes. So there was some consistency there. He had 68 penalty minutes in 21-22, had 68 penalty minutes in 22-23. And when it came to putting people on their ass, he was very good at the hits columns. He was getting his checks. This was a Keegan Kolesar who was really earning and really helping himself become that everyday guy on the bottom 6 for the Vegas Golden Knights. That was part 1. Then part 2 in the postseason. This was a Keegan Kolesar that when the Vegas Golden Knights went all the way to the Stanley Cup and won the Stanley Cup championship, getting his first ever Stanley Cup championship as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. He played in 22 postseason games that year, or had 2 goals during that Stanley Cup run, and he had over 50 penalty minutes. So if you want to sit there and analyze that correctly, he had around 118 penalty minutes if you combine his regular season and postseason during that Stanley Cup run. You really saw that not just his maturity level was growing each year he was with the Golden Knights, but he was trusted as a guy who would stand up for his teammates, right? That is what he ended up being with the Vegas Golden Knights. And that Stanley Cup run was a massive deal. The run he had with the Florida Panthers and Vegas Golden Knights and the physicality that you saw in the Stanley Cup final, Keegan Kolesar was in the trenches there. Keegan Kolesar was making those hits and being on middle ice and having those confrontations with Florida during the Stanley Cup final run. And then in this past season that we just saw, 23-24, 79 games, all right, only missed 3 games in that year. He had 8 goals. So, hey, that consistency's there. 8 goals the year prior, 8 goals that year. He had 10 assists. Consistency, once again. 10 assists in the year before, 10 assists this year. 18 points. Man, the consistency. 18 points a year before, 18 points this year. And unfortunately, he did not have the same consistency in the penalty minutes department as he actually improved from the year prior, as he had only 49 penalty minutes for the Vegas Golden Knights. So instead of racking up 60-plus penalty minutes like he did the 2 years prior, he had only 49. And when the Vegas Golden Knights went to the postseason for the 2024 Stanley Cup playoffs, he played in 6 of the 7 games that year, and he did not rack up any goals, any assists, and any points, but he did have 2 penalty minutes. This is actually one of the negatives I did mention when I did my recap show at the end of the 24 season. It felt like during the postseason, he was just a warm body just skating around. Yes, he did have his decent hits, and he did have some good time on ice there. But, he was just kind of a bottom 6 forward during those 6 of the 7 games in the postseason. And getting into the present day, which is what part 5 of this series is, Keegan Kolesar will be an everyday starter for the 4th season here in Vegas. But watching practice, watching training camp, watching Keegan Kolesar, it is very apparent that Keegan Kolesar has matured into a leader with the Vegas Golden Knights. That with him being in his 6th season with the Vegas Golden Knights organization, someone who was, when it came to the minors, was here through all 8 seasons the Vegas Golden Knights have been around. This is a Keegan Kolesar that has matured into a locker room leader. It is someone, a Keegan Kolesar, that you can depend on every single night. He's not a part-time guy anymore. We have experienced the last 3 seasons. He is an everyday guy. And depending on what happens with the bottom 6, there's going to be an interchangeable stuff going on. But Nicholas Waugh and Keegan Kolesar have a lot of chemistry playing on the same line on the bottom 6. I don't expect that to be any different in 24-25. And then when you have guys that are coming in and out, you have young guys like Brendan Bryson. He'll be on the bottom 6. We're seeing, Brett Howden. He's been on the bottom 6 for a little bit. We have also experienced what we have seen with Alexander Holtz. We'll see what he does on the bottom 6 or maybe middle 6 role. But when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, regardless of who you put on that 4th line with him, even on occasion when you bump him up to the 3rd line and you have just an AHL 4th line. But when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, the progression with the Vegas Golden Knights has been impactful, and that was the video we made here tonight. So this is Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, And as we are at this point in the season, we're seeing the 24-25 season. I wish the best of luck to Keegan Kolesar, and hopefully he can keep up the pace and consistency we have seen throughout his tenure in Vegas, and he continues to be the team leader we know he can be. This is Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and until next time, go Knights, go.